This podcast was recorded on the ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation.
This is Humans on Rights, a podcast advocating for the education of human rights. Here's your host, Stuart Murray.
When we hear the phrase zero waste, we often picture recycling bins or reusable coffee cups. But behind every piece of waste, there's a human story. Someone who made it, someone who handles it, and communities who live with its impact. Zero waste isn't just about cleaning up our planet. It's about fairness, dignity, and the right for every person to live in a safe, healthy environment. Because protecting the earth and protecting people are really the same conversation. So on this episode of Humans on Rights, I'm joined by Helga Jakobson, Sustainability Coordinator at the Forks, and many other things, by the way, but this is what we're talking about today, Sustainability Coordinator at the Forks, a place that's becoming a living example of how community spaces can take sustainability from an idea to everyday action. So Helga Jakobson, welcome to Humans on Rights.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So Helga, you have a tremendous resume, and I just didn't want to sort of spend the whole thing reading it, but certainly it'll be on our notes on this episode. But perhaps just introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about what you're doing about zero waste at the Forks, please.
Absolutely. So Helga Jacobsen, she, her pronouns. I'm the sustainability coordinator here at the Forks, but I'm primarily an artist. I studied in transdisciplinary new media. And the reason that I kind of laid that as the background is that my art practice has informed all of my actions and led me into being an environmentalist in my own right. My background in new media means that I'm a bit of a data fan, and which leads right into zero waste and into the sustainability world. It's really important to think through your human scale impact as an individual, and then also looking at the wider context and globally, locally, and looking at what's happening all around you and finding a way of synthesizing that information has led me into a deep passion for communicating to people what's going on, and in a way that's understandable, because we're in a big mess. And, the Forks is such a lovely place to work, because I often say this when I go to a conference or when I'm in a training session. I'll hear a lot of complaints about lack of innovation from their CEOs or from the boards of directors that people are working for. And I have none of that. I live a pretty lucky life. I know that everyone on the staff at the Forks here and the majority of the people who visit are all very sustainably minded. All of our tenants are a dream to work with. I don't have one person on any front that I find any pushback from. It's a really lovely environment, and I feel very lucky.
Yeah, and without sort of trying to spotlight on your CEO, Sarah Stasiak, who I know well, who was responsible for this intro, by the way.
Yeah.
She runs a wonderful operation there. And so let's dive into it. I mean, one of the things about zero waste, Helga, when you think about it, it sounds like it's like a pipe dream, right? I mean, you have to have a dream in order to sort of get to where you're going. But, just before we get into the specifics of what you're doing, you touched a little bit on the fact that, there's some big issues out there. So, for those that are listening to this podcast, why is sort of zero waste or that sustainability issue from a human rights perspective so important now? And why would you say it's important to the people of Winnipeg?
I mean, how long do we have? No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
For sure. No, all good. This is your podcast.
We know from the Paris Accord that global warming is an incredible issue. The lofty goals put forward that seemed attainable at the time are not being met. That 1.5 degrees Celsius we're not there. When we're looking statistically at overconsumption, when we're looking statistically at the environmental impact that overconsumption has, whether it's through waste reduction lenses or whether you're looking at resource extraction or overusage, we can see that, there are very clearly divides in who is and is not participating in good ways on this earth. And we're moving closer and closer to midnight on the global doomsday clock. We have our Earth Overshoot Day is coming fast at March 26th this year from the overconsumption lens. It's time for real change. We're running out of the resources that we need to be able to function in the way that we are. When we look at overconsumption, Manitoba specifically is rated as the third worst province in Canada, or actually the second worst province recently. And Canada is number 3 on the global scale. So we are the problem for overconsumption. And so making active and tangible steps are critical on a global scale when you look at the coral reefs dying out and the impact that has, where we see all of these natural disasters like wildfire season being a given here in Manitoba specifically. But you also look at Hurricane Melissa hitting Jamaica right now. You look at all of these actions, like war actions that are happening around the world, and knowing the global impact that those human rights violations have, it's devastating. And so, to root it back from a net zero standpoint, it is a lofty goal. It's maybe unreachable to hit zero globally and for individuals as well. But it's really important. And the closer that we get to that target, the better. We know this. Net zero, target zero, our phrase is target zero. These are all actions that are one step at a time and bit by bit kind of eating the elephant, so to speak. But and the roadmap to getting there looks different for different people in different places, in government, in corporations, on an individual scale. And all of these small actions add up. The way that I look at target zero or net zero or zero waste, that lofty realm that I work in and live in, I think about the power of imagination. So I come at all of these actions as an artist. And, when you look there, I went to a really lovely talk one time by an Afrofuturist author named Itasha Womack. And she said, and she was hearkening to Ursula K. Le Guin, who's an incredible science fiction author and individual in her own right. And, Itasha was bringing forward, if you cannot imagine a better world, there is not going to be a better world to live in. And the power of imagination and setting zero as a goal is critical, because then if you don't quite hit that zero, you've come so much further, right? And so in the sustainability world, it's really important to reframe and reimagine how we're functioning. So at the Forks, we operate in the realms of circular economy and looking at our actions from a different perspective than the linear economy that we've become accustomed to, which linear economy being, you produce, you consume, you throw away and start again. So kind of keeping things in that one line, where circular economy is thinking about how to keep things in action and the material aspects of circularity of, okay, how can we make sure that we're not wasting? And that comes into almost every level at the Forks, which is just so awesome.
Yeah. And we're going to explore that, because there was a great article just recently about coffee grounds. And I want to get into that because I'm a huge coffee drinker. But so Helga, just help me a little bit. You said something about overconsumption date. I think you talked about March is coming. What? Just explain what that is for those people that don't know.
That's the overshot date. So looking at overshooting, it's looking at the goals that your country, that your province, that, globally we've set. So things like the Paris Accord and looking at if per year, what's the point at which you've overshot your goals and you're not going to meet it? Ours is March.
On the March from what, the calendar year though?
The calendar year. Yeah, from January's date.
Wow.
So it just means to say that the goals that we're presenting forward are not reachable. And so, how can we act more quickly? These dates and those kind of information can feel really overwhelming, but it can also just speak to, not operating as business as usual, and really thinking about how on an individual or corporate scale or provincial scale, et cetera, we can act differently and use that as a motivator to move faster towards our goals.
Right. So then, Helga, just, looking at, and again, by the way, I would just sort of give a big shout out to whoever does the website for the Forks. It's really fabulous and lots of great information there. And the fact that on the website template, one of the headings is Target Zero, it just, again, speaks to how important this initiative is for you and the whole Forks team. Just to play a little bit of devil's advocate for a second, okay? So say, for example, and I've just used numbers for the conversation. So say that you've realized that at the Forks you have somewhere in the neighborhood and you've been able to measure that there's a 10% waste in what you do in your circular economy and how you do it. If you set a goal of saying, you know what, we're going to cut that in half. We're going to go to 5%. And work hard at that and see where you go. The only reason I'm saying it, Helga, is I love your notion. If you imagine and you dream big and you say, we're going to 0, and you say, all right, at 10 and you get to 5 or you get to 6, you get to 4, you're moving in the right direction. I mean, you can't look at that as anything other than positive. You can't sort of say, well, we didn't hit 0. What our goal is to reduce it, and we're marching towards that goal. I just think for those people that are listening, because I know a lot of times, Helga, you talk about the Paris Accord and governments meet and, they have this huge manifesto that they all agree to and it's a big number. And the reality is that at some point it just becomes a number. It's not something that is realistic. And, people can pat themselves on the back and they can use it in a speech and applaud or get applause from the audience with the hopes. But, where do we sort of come full circle to sort of say, we are talking about Target Zero. We're passionate about it. You talk about 0 garbage, 0 water waste, and 0 carbon
Emissions,
0 carbon emissions. Yeah. So, what I love about it is you're trying to put it out there so it's all measurable. And, the old adage, you can only manage what you can measure. So how are you looking at measuring some of these incredible targets that you have aggressively set for the Forks?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, I'm so lucky, you're right. Like the website design is beautiful. We have an incredible communications team and an external relations team, and everyone on staff is on board. The way that the Forks approaches our Target Zero initiatives is to situate ourselves where the two greens meet, where two rivers meet. So we're used to that meeting point. This is a historic meeting point of over 6,000 years. We're setting our goals in line with generational approaches. So looking at the 7 generations, for instance, and trying to do right on that scale. So I say that because the first point of action for us comes from doing right by the earth, but we do it where the two greens meet. So where it's fiscally responsible as well as environmentally friendly. There's not an exact 50-50 split between those two. Some actions are going to be more costly, but the inherent value is clearly there. And sometimes it's going to be a lot more unfeasible to manage certain activities that we would love to. So we just can't do them. So first of all, the matrix that we set is kind of framing through that framework. Yeah. And then the way that we measure depends on the thing that we're doing. So for instance, where the two greens meet, we realized that it was astronomically expensive to heat and cool an historic building like a market space that wasn't intended to be a food hall, for instance. And so we installed a $2.2 million geothermal heating system. It's a huge bill up front, but we've paid for it above and beyond with the savings that it's given us. So that was a really great landmark kind of beacon for us of, wow, okay, environmentally friendly activities can actually save you a lot of money. And so that kind of set in motion a lot of actions on site. We of course look at the things that are the highest priorities and have the highest impact and try to tackle those first. So things like diesel fuel and carbon emissions, we've transformed our ice resurfacer, or Zamboni. You can't call it a Zamboni because it's not Zamboni brand.
Okay, ice resurfacer. Very good.
Yeah,
Well done.
our ice resurfacer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that, as well as the Kubotas on our site, all run on recycled French fry grease. So we take the grease that normally would be a waste material, and I run it through a centrifuge and a filtration process on site that turns it into a biofuel. So that comes with a great cost savings as well as being a great earth-friendly activity. It's a tangible way of lowering emissions. And then from a circular economy standpoint, looking at, can we walk in between spaces? If you can't walk, then can you use these Kubotas before anything else? And kind of going from there. So tackling the larger problem first is really critical. Looking at emissions caused by food waste, we set up our own composting facility, which isn't as good of a return on investment as geothermal, but intrinsically it has such a great value, and it's absolutely a critical activity on this earth. So that's what we do. And we do save a lot of money because we're not hauling usable material off site to a landfill where it will not decompose appropriately and will produce more greenhouse gas.
I just think a lot of people talk about composting, in their own homes locally. And part of, what I think is admirable of what you're doing is, you're kind of giving examples, real examples. And I mean, just a reminder to anybody who's listening who hasn't been to the Forks, I can't imagine people that are listening haven't been to the Forks. You have over 4 million visitors a year, right? But I'm just saying, when you look at the goals that you're trying to do with that volume of people, you kind of step back and say, how hard could it be for a family of 4, right, in a house? So you're trying to sort of look at that. But composting is something that a lot of people talk about. Walk us through the composting process that you do at the Forks, and what do you do with the residue when you're able to sort of, once it's fully composted?
On an individual scale, I'll maybe speak to the bigger picture first, which is that we really absolutely, it's critical that we get municipal composting. We should have green bin pickups. It's a bit embarrassing that we don't have that for people, because not everyone has a backyard. Not everybody has the knowledge base or the time to be able to do that personal composting. And so places like Compost Winnipeg are absolutely wonderful. They provide a service like that. So people, if you don't have composting at home and you're one of the people listening, you could sign up for Compost Winnipeg. They're really lovely. Composting is an absolutely critical activity for moving towards net zero. For us, we have the facility to not only manage food waste, so pre and post consumer materials that are able to be composted, but we also can compost packaging, which would not be appropriate in a home setting. So using bioplastics and things like that are mandated at the Forks. So all of the takeout containers that you see on our site go through my approval, and they are compostable in our facilities. So not only are we taking the food scraps and offcuts from food preparation, but we're also taking the packaging. So we're really minimizing our waste in an incredible way. We just this year alone, in comparison to 2024, in 2025, we've produced 40 tons less waste going to the landfill. And a major portion of that is because of our composting activities and our recycling programs, and education. Because we don't have those municipal supports in individual composting, our public doesn't know how to compost appropriately. So what we've done is we've set up a sorting station where you bring your tray and you drop it off at that station, and our trained team makes sure that any excess is going into our composting facility. So we have a machine on site called a BioVator, which you put in all of the food waste and packaging that is compostable. in with a ratio of carbon material, so wood chips that are produced on site when we have to cut down trees or anything like that, the leaf litter that happens. And we combine the two and then output compost. We run it through our procedures. So we turn the compost and make sure that it's gone through the PRFP, which is the process to reduce further pathogens, which is how we're legislated to be able to run this facility, because we produce 500 metric tons of compost per year. And so with that material, we then screen it out and we create fine compost as well as a mulch compost. So the mulch compost goes onto our orchard and into a lot of our flower beds, some of our native species flower beds, as well as anything on site. And then we top dress all of the turf. So if you've ever enjoyed an outdoor concert, or you come to the Pride Parade, or any of those wonderful outdoor activities that we have on at the Forks, you've been on grass that has been supported through you eating French fries. So we run a full circle loop. It's really lovely.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, those numbers are huge. But again, I come back to, the notion that you have 4 million visitors. And, I mean, the whole process, I think, of getting to, target zero, it's such an education, Helga. I mean, I would say the one thing that, as somebody who goes to the Forks a fair bit, and I love it down there, so I'm the 3,999,999th person, right, in addition, that goes there, is, you do have adequate places for waste. You do have adequate places for those people that have finished, with their food or whatever that may be. And, the team that you have that comes around and does the cleaning and does the sorting and stuff, again, kind of those unnamed heroes, right? Like, amazing work that they do, and they make sure that happens. Because, Helga, just kind of full disclosure, I got to tell you, sometimes when I'm sitting there with, say I've had a burger and it's in a container, and I've had a coffee and it's in a container, and I've got my utensil and my napkin, and I'm ready to sort of put it in, and it's almost like I got 3 choices here. There's 3 little holes you got to figure out where you're going to put it. And, sometimes, in fairness, I look at it and go, oh my goodness, I think this is the right spot for this. But, to me, again, I'll just be the first one to say, I could be a bit more educated to make the right decision. But a lot of people who are just sort of saying, well, I don't know, somebody else will look after it, just kind of put it in. How do you deal with people like me?
Oh, well, I love dealing with people like you. Not only are you lovely, Stuart, but also it's not your fault. The issue is a lack of education from a systemic level, but it's also that every system is different. So you need localized solutions to localized problems. What is quote unquote recyclable is not necessarily accepted in every facility, in every province, in every city, etc. And without that information sharing from those in positions of power and those managing those facilities, then you're not empowered to know. And so for us, the way that we deal with it is we have almost no garbages on our site, and in the interior space at least. And what we do is we have people going around to support you, because we know that everyone, it's true right across the board. The majority of people want to do right, but we're overwhelmed. We're tired, we're taxed, we're overworked, and we don't know. And so for us, what we've done is we've implemented a new tray system. So it's similar to an IKEA style facility where you can just drop off your tray, drop off your garbage, drop off your recycling that you think might be garbage or you don't really know, and we'll deal with it, because we have a team who are paid a nice wage to be able to manage that and who are trained. So our idea is we don't want to be shaming. We don't want to be negatively enforcing that somebody is incorrect, because that doesn't lead to a more informed, a more empowered population. It just leads to people who will then hide their trash, or take it home and throw it out, or what have you. And so, so we really take that supportive approach to being able to allow people to do right. Like, not every facility, in fact, most facilities don't have composting in Manitoba. There are more and more, thanks to Compost Winnipeg. But people don't have those options. And so we're not expecting that everybody knows how to do that here. We just want to provide them the opportunity to know and rest easy that if they're wanting to make an environmentally friendly dining experience for themselves, they can do it at the Forks. you know?
Right. Perfect. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that, Helga. So listen, a little bit of a pivot sidebar. So Compost Winnipeg, if you reach out to them and I will, what will they do for you? I know this isn't part of what you do at the Forks, by the way. This is kind of a sidebar, but it's all in the bigger picture of doing the right thing, right? So what would they do?
What they would do is you can either pay for a service to have a bin at your house that they'll pick up weekly or someone, they'll figure out a schedule with you. Again, I don't work for them, but I'm really happy to share because it's all for this greater good, of course. And we collaborate with them. They're lovely individuals and an organization. But so you can do that, or you can go on their map, and there are a number of drop-off locations where you can simply take your compost to for free. So if cost is a barrier, we're here talking about human rights. Everyone should have the right to be able to do well with their waste. And so finances shouldn't be a barrier. So there are free drop-off spots at a number of locations around the city. So you can transport it yourself, or you can pay for a private service to compost with them. And then they also do training sessions. You can take courses in learning how to do it yourself in your own backyard if you're that kind of a person. But there should be all of those different options because the amount of waste in Manitoba is astronomical. And being able to appropriately divert is one of the highest impacts that you can have. Our number 1 and 2, greenhouse gas and carbon emitting practices are transportation, number 1. And then number 2 is landfill, and agriculture. So as an individual, that's one of the best things that you can do is compost. Those materials are so great and useful for the earth, being able to create compost. It's just magical. So I'm thrilled being able to provide that support at the Forks here and also to preach the goodness of it and to know that we have Compost Winnipeg doing that incredible work and supporting individuals.
Thanks for sharing. I mean, it's really good, important information. So thanks for that, Helga. Appreciate it. Let's go back to chatting a little bit about you talked about on your website, Target Zero. You talked about zero garbage, which I think you've talked a little bit about. I want to sort of explore a little bit about zero water waste. Well, just talk a little bit about how do you come to recognizing that there's a waste in water, and then how do you make it zero?
That one's a little bit further off on the list. Our focus is first and foremost the waste diversion because it has the higher impact and the carbon emissions. So the zero water waste, we have low flow flush toilets where we're making sure that we're doing regular monitoring through our water bills, etc., making sure that there are no leaks. So we're preemptively monitoring and we're constantly sourcing other opportunities. So looking at low flow valves and things like that. Although again, that's not our highest activity. Our highest are those 2 major impacts of waste diversion and carbon emissions.
Okay. And so the carbon emission really comes down to the biofuel process that you're involved in.
Yeah, and also supporting individuals in active transport. So we have bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes. We have cyclist counters. We're watching how people are coming into the Forks and exiting the Forks, and we're trying to support them actively. We have a number of bus routes. We also have installed EV charging stations. And yeah, so that's one other way that we're supporting lower carbon emission and also reducing the amount of hauls from our site and figuring out how to manage waste on site so that we don't need to send things away. So that comes back to the circular economy where it's looking at procurement models. So being clever about how you're purchasing and managing the materials you already own and have on site. So we often do, like a very recent one is we have a number of boards that we're getting taken down from a parking area, and we store those and make sure that we're able to use those materials in existence before ever purchasing more. All of that includes less trips to and from the store, for hauling materials away to landfill sites or recycling facilities. And so that ties into our waste diversion as well. With that reduction in 40 metric tons in a year, that means that equates to at least 4 less trips to the landfill, which comes with an incredible cost for carbon emissions if we add everything all together. So just being clever about material management is a really important part of stewardship.
One of the things you touched on at the beginning, Helga, was geothermal. And, again, one of the things I'd just be interested in, maybe you don't have this, which is fair because you're not an accountant, you're doing a lot of other things. But the point I would just ask is that, a lot of people would say, okay, here's the deal. We put $2.2 million into the ground, and people go, $2.2 million, where do we get that from? Then you start to say, okay, but here's how this plays out. And so the $2.2 million is offsetting what we would normally have to pay, whether it's hydro or whatever it may be, to sort of heat this. And so over the course of time, as you say, it kind of pays for itself. Just a curious question, and I understand if you might not have this, but do you know how long it took to get the 2.2 million sort of paid out?
My understanding is that it was under 10 years.
Wow.
I'm not sure the exact number and all of the intricacies involved, but it's not that long. And I mean, that's at the Forks, right? Can you imagine if new builds were required to put in the geothermal? It would be incredible. And just to bring it back to the point of human rights, we oftentimes think about hydropower, which is our predominant power source, as being an incredibly environmentally friendly energy source, but it's not. It comes with a high cost to biodiversity. There are a lot of First Nations people who are negatively impacted by the dams that are in their communities. And so it's really nice to be able to work in a place knowing that it's powered from the earth and from the river right next to us. It feels a lot nicer.
Yeah, no, it's and I kind of love how you kind of put that all as part of the narrative, Helga, because I do think that the Forks is a very, very special place and has done amazing work. And a lot of it is just, on the basis that as from a tourist or a commercial entity, it's a great place to be. When you start to bake in these whole issues about sustainability and I love the fact you keep coming back to the reference on human rights, because this is a podcast on human rights. For those people, Helga, that would just sort of say, oh, come on, what you're really talking about is, just putting in some sustainability, doing some composting, and yeah, it sounds great and the numbers are great. But, really, let's bring it home to a human rights perspective. And I'd love for you to sort of share that, because I know from your background, from being an artist, and how you look at sort of the human perspective, bringing what you know. And I can tell you that when I asked Sarah Stasiak about sustainability, she said, I can't exactly use all the words here. This is kind of a family podcast, but she was like, oh my God, you've got somebody that you got to meet, Helga Jacobson. So, you have a lot of passion for this, Helga, and you have a lot of expertise. Tie it in from a perspective of working in an area where the Forks, a very, very public community space where there's a lot of moving parts, restaurants, activities, and yet, let's market it as a human rights initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's so nice to hear. Sarah's an incredible leader. She's so exceptional. What she's done at the Forks has been out of this world. And I'm just so thankful to work here and specifically get to work with her. She's wonderful. Yeah, from my perspective, one of the reasons that I decided to take this job was because of the impact that it has. 4 million people is not something to scoff at. That's a huge impact. And a lot of tourists, a lot of people who are coming here for the first time, we're lucky to be on Treaty 1 territory. This is the heart of Turtle Island. The Forks being this historic meeting point for, thousands and thousands of years. This land feels very special and very important. It's so lovely to be able to watch how those 4 million people engage on the site. looking at everything from the winter, being a Manitoban yourself, it can be really challenging in those cold months. And to have the skating trail, this epic skating trail with art on it, with these warming huts that are just so interesting and of an international caliber, it's humanizing. It feels really wonderful. And you don't have to spend a penny to come and enjoy it. And one of the things that's so absolutely critically important here is that this space is still a free meeting space, and it will be for generations to come. It's harder and harder living in a world where finances get tighter and tighter, watching, the doom out in the world and having somewhere right in the heart of your city to be able to come to. You don't have to feel the stress and strain of finances as a barrier. You can come and gather food for free at our orchard, for instance. You can come bring your own lunch and no one is going to bat an eye or make you feel uncomfortable for just enjoying your own food or your own space. Getting to watch people engage in activities like free crafting nights, free ping pong tournaments, things like that. And just knowing that it's generating this good and healthy environment, all while we have these closed circles like our composting activities, being able to use what's on the site, having land that we're stewarding in a way that's supportive of not only the humans getting to enjoy the beauty of these gardens, but planting native species which are drought tolerant, which are good for the native pollinators, and watching the birds coming in. It's really what the Forks does is follows through on the health and well-being of the full environment and the full ecosystem of not only Winnipeg and Manitoba, but of anybody who's actively enjoying the space. And I mean, that's human rights. We have the right to a healthy environment. We have the right to be able to live a good life. And I really feel as though the Forks does such an exceptional job at it. It's so nice to be a piece of that puzzle. And again, like thinking about sustainability, not just from a material management perspective, but also from a food justice perspective, from equitable access. It's pretty exceptional.
Yeah, no, it is. And thank you for kind of putting a bow around that, because there's a whole lot of kind of human rights elements that are tied into this. And I think, one of the things that we try to do, at least on this podcast, this is all about sort of how do you sort of get people to sort of educate people, then to get them to sort of give a sense of taking action, sort of here's what you can do. And I think hopefully what you've demonstrated in numerous ways through this conversation, Helga, is that, if you can do something in an entity as large a footprint as the Forks, how do you do it in your home, and how can you do it in an apartment? And so there's all these opportunities I think we can get to. I wanted to just get you to talk a little bit, if you will, about the cycling path that you have got from Osborne Village into St. Boniface, into the Forks. And I want to do that on the basis that, having just come from Amsterdam, where there's a tremendous number of cyclists there, and I know it's an ongoing issue with cycling in Winnipeg, as we start to engage more bike lanes, you see more people on bikes. How is that something that you see yourself playing a huge role in? And not Helga Jacobson, but you in your role as sustainability coordinator for the Forks. How do you see advocating for that, educating people on the importance of how that also can be a big impact on what you're targeting, which is target zero for the Forks?
Well, I mean, and again, to bring it back to this human rights perspective, we have the right to be able to engage in transportation to and from the spaces that we need to get to, like our job from our home, the grocery store from our home, to a friend's house, etc. We have the right to be able to do that without needing to pay. Active transport is absolutely critical from an intersectional standpoint. Not everyone has the finances to be able to afford busing. not everyone has the ability to afford a car, and they should have the ability to get to and from where they need to be. First and foremost, never mind, you should be able to do that separated from cars so that you're not breathing in exhaust fumes, which are terrible for your physical health. And also, those exhaust fumes are the number one issue in our net zero pathway to sustainability. The amount of carbon emissions that come from cars is astronomical. And in Manitoba, we don't have enough adequate active transport supports in place. And so, having at the Forks, being able to keep separated bike lanes, having pathways that folks can cycle through the prairie gardens, along the river, spaces that are completely separated from cars feels like such a gift to the city. And it's something that we will continually provide supports with. We have bike racks. We have a lot of resources like the wrench, where you can come and use this as a pit stop to repair your bike. It feels like a really lovely site for a number of reasons, and active transport is a really big part of it. You can also rent a bike here. And even in the winter, Kendrick's has winter bikes, so you can try out what that feels like on a fat tire bike. So it's, it doesn't fully root to something tangible necessarily or a bigger action, but that's part of the importance. And we want to be a bike friendly space.
Okay, for sure. And I have a couple of quick hits for you before I get into the coffee ground piece. I want to go there. But just, so Helga, obviously you've done some tremendous work with your team there. Obviously, would love to just sort of share some of your maybe one of your biggest challenges and maybe one of your biggest successes.
One of the biggest successes is our waste diversion. Watching 40 metric tons, I just keep saying that number because I'm still shocked by it and enlivened and thankful, because all of that sort of number only comes with multiple people feeling empowered, educated, and supported to make better decisions around waste management. I love talking trash, pardon my pun. And so that's probably my biggest feeling of triumph here.
Just to visualize for a sec, 40 tons. Like, it's a massive number, huge. What is the equivalent of 40 tons? Do you have a visual that you could sort of throw out to people who are listening?
It would depend on the elephant, but it would be about 10 to 15 elephants. It's massive. When you look at, I'm not sure how familiar the average person is with the look of a garbage compactor, but it's four garbage compactors full. So 4 40-yard bins. It's huge. It feels like a real win.
That is huge. And that's, I love the visual, because a lot of people, 40 sounds like 40s. Well, it's one more than 39, and tons, I don't know what a ton is, but like the elephant, like that's, so thank you for that visualization. I think that's super helpful and something to be super proud of for sure. What about a challenge?
The biggest challenge is lack of facilities that accept materials locally that are not necessarily commingled. In the recycling realm, there are no processing plants that I'm aware of locally. We are only limited to managing the materials that come into our site, and there are certain kinds of plastics, there are certain kinds of materials that just simply are not accepted at the MRF, like the local recycling facility, and that's frustrating. What we've done to combat that is we have a single-use plastics ban. So we're minimizing constantly the materials that are coming in on site and working one-on-one specifically with our food tenants, because that's where a large portion of single-use waste comes from. We're constantly trying to problem solve, but it's a real frustration. There is a manufacturer ban that was put in place for single-use plastics federally that just launched in September, and it's frankly too little too late. We always need to continue on that movement. And as Donna Haraway, one of my great loves, says the game's not over, not yet. Any action is a good action, but it's frustrating. So I think that's my biggest complaint is the lack of recycling facilities.
The reason you're there is to sort of deal with these issues, right? I mean, that's your expertise. So, I appreciate you sharing that. I just, a couple of things that jumped to mind is that when I went through, you talked about sort of if people want to look at something or get some visuals, you mentioned documentaries, The Story of Plastics, just coming back to what you mentioned on plastic. And then, of course,
it's a short one.
Then Our Planet, David Attenborough, who, the guy could talk about how to make paint, and he's just so interesting. His voice is so incredible. So, but Helga, has there been any discussion, about making a documentary about the work that you're doing at the Forks to target zero?
Not that I'm aware of, but I know the Forks is always thrilled to share any information. So, I'm sure we would be very happy to do that if someone was interested. But also, if any individual or company or group is looking for resources, we love sharing. So part of being an innovator means we don't want people to have to start from zero. We want to share so that they can start at, the fifth rung on the ladder and cut out some of that learning curve, right? We've had to go through it and it's challenging. So anyone is so welcome to reach out, whether it's for a documentary or whether it's just for a little tip or trick, we're happy to share.
Yeah, I ask it not in any way tongue in cheek. I ask it seriously because I do think, that the work you're doing, needs to be captured. It needs to be shared. And as you say, you're so open, and what you've shared already and talk about Compost Winnipeg, that is just, sort of a wonderful, act of kindness, which I think, we need to have more in this world. So that's a whole other issue. But thank you for that. And so, Helga, I did start almost the podcast off with this question. We're going to kind of, as the hourglass kind of comes to an end here, but talk about turning coffee grinds into grit. Talk a little bit about that. I love that article, but share with the listeners the process.
I'd love to. Yeah. So we realized that, we don't work with salts at all for de-icing. Manitoba, especially as climate crisis worsens, we are going to find more and more extreme weather events and weather circumstances. And ice is a real problem, as we know from an accessibility standpoint, again, to root it back to human rights. And it's also just a challenge to deal with in an environmentally responsible way. Working with salts is terrible for the environment. And so we use grit. So we only use pebbles. And my role, I feel so lucky to have my role. My role is a lot of working with people and talking to people and thinking through problems. And one of our lovely tenants from Fools and Horses, Ben Gillies, who's the owner, was talking to me about sustainability in general and the work that they're doing, which is incredible. They've adopted and exceeded all of our expectations around sustainability. He said, hey, actually, you'll be interested in this. I've been taking home some of our coffee grinds that we usually compost at the Forks, and I brought them to my mom's to test out on her pathway leading up to her house, and it works as a de-icer. Did you know that? And I said, oh, no, I didn't. So I said, oh, well, why don't we try it out here? It would be really interesting to see. And it was wonderful. It's a very effective de-icer. It melts the ice. So it's not just grit, but it de-ices. It's completely biodegradable. It's completely, it dissolves away over time. It smells lovely. It's effective. It's free. It's check, check, check.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. So you don't mix the coffee grounds with anything, Helga? You just
you just toss it.
Wow. Okay. That is big checkbox. Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah. A hot tip for a Winnipegger.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, what a great business it would be for somebody to go around and collect all of this and then repackage it, right? So anyway, that's a business you and I will start on the side.
100%. Yeah, I'm in. We'll talk later about that.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Hey, Helga, what a great conversation. Thank you so much. I said at the outset before we went online live just to talk about, you've got such a great background and what you do. And as you talk about sort of being an artist first, I love that because it really brings your creativity to how you interpret these things and say, I can see how you've, really used your background in a way that has advanced something that some people would look at and sort of say, well, you're just recycling cups, right? Like that's all it is. And it's like, yeah, it could be, but that's also exciting in its own way. So Helga, thank you for this. And I usually just always say to my podcast guests, obviously, thank you so much for being on. But, it's a big question, I guess, but I would like to just sort of ask you, is there something that you were hoping in this podcast about sustainability and human rights that I might ask you that I haven't asked you?
Not necessarily, but thank you for asking it now. I think for me, a really important piece is learning how to listen better. I think that, we're in some pretty big messes when it comes to sustainability, and specifically listening to Indigenous voices is absolutely critical. A lot of the constructs that we have and systems that we have in place are colonial systems. And so it's really important looking at water protectors, looking at the folks who are experiencing and understand the land that we're on is absolutely critical. And so I think that's from a human rights perspective, I think that's a lesson right across the board is just listening to Indigenous voices, something that I can share, from my perspective, one of the biggest issues that we're facing in Manitoba is water quality. Maybe like the water sources that we have are greatly polluted and greatly affected by our activities. And that's definitely something that is constantly on my mind, how to do better. And from an individual standpoint, speak to your representatives. That's one of the best things that you can do is voice your opinions to your local counselors. They're there to advocate and amplify your voice. So be vocal. You look at what happened with the Lemay Forest here in Manitoba and the incredible advocacy of individuals. Everyone has the ability to create impact around them. And so speak up. And yeah, I think stay hopeful, because it feels really overpowering, especially with news that comes in that's not pleasant all of the time. And if you have a business, that's one of the greatest voices that are listened to. I just went on a great bus tour yesterday on sustainability from Climate for Biz, or Biz for Climate, pardon me, wrong way around, Biz for Climate. And corporations like the Forks does great work internally. Every business can do that, and every business has the right to speak up for their clientele and their visitors.
Helga, thank you so much. It's sort of one of those things that I was trying to end by saying, keep listening, keep questioning, and keep taking a stand for human rights. So Helga Jacobsen, the Sustainability Coordinator at the Forks, thank you so much for taking some time to be Humans on Rights on this podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for doing this great work.
Thanks for listening to Humans on Rights. A transcript of this episode is available by clicking the link in the show notes of this episode. Humans on Rights is recorded and hosted by Stuart Murray. Social media marketing by Buffy Davey. Music by Doug Edmond. For more, go to humanrightshub.ca. Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.